She never knew who I really was. But that one night in Paris, with just one first kiss, our lives changed forever. I never imagined that from that moment on, I would carry my family name into her destiny and down the aisle. That night, Paris was like a living painting. The streetlights twinkled, reflecting a golden glow on the wet stones of the street from the afternoon drizzle. The aroma of coffee and warm croissants filled the air, mixed with jazz, music flowing softly from a small cafe on the corner of Rue des Rosiers. This city, with all its charm, always managed to captivate anyone who came. I, Lucas Moreau, sat pensively on a small park bench near Place des Vosges, watching the crowds passing by. I was 28 years old, but my life felt like an endless drama that I played to keep my family's reputation clean from scandal. The Moreau family, famous businessmen in Paris, always demanded that I appear perfect, but I always felt like there was a part of me missing, a side that I never showed to the world. I deliberately chose Le Marais as an escape. This is where I hope to find a glimmer of freedom, away from the spotlight and expectations. But tonight I felt more alone than usual. Suddenly across the street, my eyes caught the figure of a young girl with curly brown hair and sparkling eyes that I couldn't hide my curiosity. She was sitting on a bench, holding a small canvas, seemingly thinking deeply about something. There was a calmness and vulnerability that radiated from her. Her name was Elisa, a painter who lived and worked in Le Marais. I knew a little about her from the casual conversation I overheard in a cafe a few days ago. She was from a small town in Provence, came to Paris with big dreams and a heart full of old wounds. She never knew who I really was. I deliberately kept my distance, trying to be myself without the shadow of a big name following me. Unintentionally, our gazes met. For a moment, time seemed to stop. There was something in her eyes that touched, something inside me, a connection that I find difficult to explain with words. For some reason, I felt as if the world I had known all this time was starting to change. In the midst of the magical silence of Le Marais, she smiled shyly and stepped closer. I knew tonight was not just an ordinary meeting. Something deeper is waiting to begin. The next morning, sunlight slowly crept through the thin curtains of my small apartment on the outskirts of Le Marais. The sounds of Paris came alive, the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk, the soft laughter of a newly opened café, and the aroma of warm croissants wafting from the boulangerie across the street. I took a deep breath, trying to capture the peace of the morning, but my mind was still fixated on Elisa. The night before, in the darkness of that city full of light, there was something that had left a mark on me. The way she sat with her small canvas, with her eyes not only looking out at the outside world, but also as if hiding a deep, sad story. I felt a sincerity and vulnerability that I rarely found in this world full of pretense. I knew that behind Elisa's smile, there was a wound that had not yet healed. I could see it in the way she ran her fingers through her hair when she thought about something, and in the way her eyes would sometimes look blank for a moment. I wonder what made her dare to leave her hometown in Provence to find a new life. In Paris? That day, I deliberately diverted my way through Rue des Rosiers, hoping to meet Elisa again. Paris mornings felt different when I knew I was going to meet someone who made my heart beat faster. I passed old bookstores, rows of coffee shops with the tempting aroma of coffee, and finally I saw her in the corner of a small cafe that was a favorite place for artists. Elisa sat there, with brushes and palette in her hands, immersed in the world of her painting. Her soft, concentrated face made me freeze for a moment. I approached slowly, trying to catch my breath so that I wouldn't get nervous. "Morning, Elisa," I said in a low voice. She turned, and her warm smile greeted me like the morning sun breaking through gray clouds. "Lucas, I didn't expect you to come," she said in a light tone, but I caught the warmth behind her words. We started talking at first about light things, the weather, her favorite cafe, and the jazz music that sometimes came from behind the cafe's window. But then, our conversation flowed deeper. Elisa told me about her dream of becoming a famous painter. about her simple family in the village, and about the bitter memories that sometimes haunted her. I also began to open up a little, about myself, not the big-name Moreau, but the simple Lucas who always felt trapped in the shadow of his family. I never told him about the pressures and expectations that weighed on me, but in front of him, I felt safe to share. Time passed imperceptibly, and we continued talking until the sky began to turn reddish-orange. There was a warmth flowing between us, a bond that I had never felt before. However, behind that momentary happiness, I knew I had to keep my secret. If one day Elisa found out who I really was, the son of the rich and influential Moreau family, I was afraid that everything would change. I was afraid of losing her, afraid that everything would become complicated and full of intrigue. But that night, I promised myself to enjoy this little freedom. The freedom to be Lucas, not Moreau. The freedom to love without the shadows of the past and the future weighing me down. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like life is real, and I want to experience every second of it with Elisa. Our days went by like a beautiful dream that slowly began to be covered by dark clouds. Lucas and Elisa grew closer, from walks along the Seine River to long conversations on a small park bench that became their secret place to share. But behind the smiles and laughter, there was something unspoken between them, a fear that began to creep slowly. Lucas knew that behind Elisa's sweet face, there was a world that he could never fully enter. The Moreau family, with all their wealth and power, had very strict unwritten rules about Lucas's future. "Don't forget who you are and who deserves to be with you," his father said in a text message that made Lucas's stomach turn. The message came that night as they sat together in a small cafe in Le Marais. Elisa, with eyes shining with hope, told him about her dream of becoming a successful painter, not knowing that every word was a heavy reminder for Lucas of the reality he had to face. My heart trembled between love and duty. I wanted to protect Elisa from the dark world that lurked around us, but I also couldn't deny my own feelings. If my family found out who she was, it could all end in tragedy. That night, after that brief encounter, I walked down the cobblestone streets wet with light rain. The usually romantic city of Paris had turned into a maze of fear and dilemma. Should I choose love or my family's honor? On the other hand, Elisa began to sense a change in Lucas's attitude. There was a distance she couldn't understand, a sudden silence that had appeared between them. But she believed in their love, even as the shadow of secrets grew larger. This conflict became the first test of our relationship. Could love survive when secrets and the pressures of the real world began to erode? Days passed with the warmth between Elisa and I growing closer. However, behind every smile and laughter we shared, there was a secret wall that began to crack slowly. A wall that separated us more than I thought. I, Lucas Moreau, lived in the shadow of my family's great name. Moreau was not just a name, but a legacy of wealth and power that demanded that I be a perfect figure. I had to maintain the family's image, live a life that had been arranged, and most importantly, I could not allow anyone to disrupt that plan, including Elisa. But she was different. Elisa was not only a passionate painter, she was a breath of fresh air that made me feel alive. She taught me the meaning of freedom and unconditional love. However, I began to feel the burden getting heavier. One afternoon, we sat in a small cafe near Place des Vosges. The sun was starting to lower, its rays slipping through the glass windows, illuminating the small dust particles that danced in the air. Elisa was busy painting, her brush dancing on the canvas, but her eyes occasionally stole glances at me. There was doubt, but also courage that she was trying to gather. "There's something you're hiding from me, right?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft but determined. I looked at her, my heart beating faster. "Elisa, there's a lot about my life that I can't tell you now," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm afraid that if you knew, everything would change." Elisa put down her brush, holding my hand tightly. Lucas, I'm not a child. I can understand that you have secrets, but I believe that if we're honest, we can face everything together. I felt suffocated. Her words touched my heart, but the shadow of my family continued to lurk. I remembered my father, with a cold look and a commanding voice, warning me in a text message a few days ago, "Don't make a mistake that will ruin the Moreau name." I knew what he meant. The relationship with Elisa was not just a mistake, but a threat. A threat to the family's legacy and reputation. That night, I left my apartment and walked aimlessly along the banks of the Seine. The cold air welcomed me, while the streetlights reflected the shimmer on the gently undulating water. The fallen leaves fluttered in the wind as if dancing with the dilemma that bound me. I asked myself, how far should I go? Am I strong enough to fight my family for this sincere love? The image of Elisa's face appeared in my mind, her hopeful eyes and smile that made me feel alive. But on the other hand, I imagined my father's stern face and the consequences that would come if I chose this path. In the silence of that Parisian night, I made a difficult decision. I had to reveal this secret to Elisa. I had to trust her, even though I was afraid of losing everything. However, I did not know yet how she would accept it. Was our love strong enough to weather the coming storm? As the days after my decision to reveal the secret drew closer, anxiety and fear continued to haunt my mind. I knew that nothing would be the same after that night, but I also knew that I couldn't keep deceiving Elisa. Not after. She had given me so much trust. We met in a small park near the Hôtel de Ville, under the shade of a maple tree whose leaves were starting to change color. The autumn wind blew softly, carrying the scent of wet earth and dry leaves. Elisa sat on a stone bench, looking calm, but I could feel the same tension that I felt. "Elisa," I began, my voice shaking, "I have something to tell you." She looked at me with eyes full of hope, but also wary. "I'm ready to listen." "Lucas." I took a deep breath and began to reveal everything that I had kept so tightly. About my family, the great name of Moreau, the pressure I felt, and why I had to keep my identity hidden from her. As I spoke, I saw her eyes change, from hope to disappointment, from love to deep hurt. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Her voice cracked. "I felt like you didn't trust me." Tears streamed down my cheeks without me realizing it. "I was scared, Elisa. Scared of losing you and scared that my family would destroy you." She paused, then slowly rose from the bench. "Lucas, I love you, but I also don't want to be a secret you keep. If we want to be together, we have to be honest and brave, not hide." Her words pierced my heart, but they also opened my eyes. I knew she was right, but I wasn't strong enough to weather the storm. That night, we walked apart on the Parisian streets, wet with light rain. I watched her go with a heavy heart, knowing that our love was being tested the hardest. But I promised myself, no matter how hard it was, I would fight through all the odds for Elisa. After my confession in the small park near the Hôtel de Ville, our relationship changed into something that could no longer be ignored. There was a distance that suddenly stretched, even though we still loved each other. Paris, which was once full of color and light, now felt dim, as if the city of love also felt the sadness that enveloped our hearts. The days passed in painful silence. My messages and calls were no longer answered by Elisa. Every ring of the phone made my chest tight, hope and fear fighting inside it. I felt like I had lost not only the person I loved, but also a part of myself that had always made me feel alive. Meanwhile, the shadow of my family was pressing down more and more. My father called more often, his firm and pressing voice demanding that I end this relationship immediately. "Lucas, you have to realize who you are and what your responsibilities are," he said coldly. "Don't let your feelings ruin your family's future." The pressure was like a storm that hit my every step, almost shaking me. But my love for Elisa was too strong to let go of just like that. I knew we both had to choose, to fight together or to surrender. One cold night, I decided to go to Elisa's small studio on Rue des Rosiers. The Parisian streets were wet from the drizzle, filled with the dim glow of streetlights. Every step I took was heavy, filled with doubt and hope. When I arrived, the studio door opened slowly. Elisa stood in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes still burning with courage. She took a deep breath and said, "Lucas, I know this is hard, but we have to decide whether we fight together or separate before everything is destroyed." I looked at her, my heart tightening and suffocating. I felt the whole world holding its breath with me, but I knew I couldn't give up. I stepped closer, clasping her hand tightly, my voice full of determination. "Elisa, I will not let you go. We will face everything together no matter what." We stood there, in the silence of the cold Parisian night, strengthening each other. Our love was tested by an unfriendly world, by the shadows of the past and the challenges of the future. But we know that true love is not only about happiness and togetherness, but also the courage to survive when the storm comes. In the cold night air, I promised myself that no matter what, I would fight for Elisa and our love. Because she is not just a simple painter from Paris, she is my hope, my future, and the most important part of my life. That night, the atmosphere in Paris felt heavy, like the burden I had been carrying all this time. After the meeting at Elisa's studio, I felt as if all my hopes and fears were united in one point, waiting to explode. I knew that the decision we were about to make would not only change our lives, but also determine our future together. The following days were filled with endless inner struggles. Elisa began to withdraw, trying to understand the reality we were facing. I saw her eyes that were once full of enthusiasm were now covered in a cloud of doubt. I tried to give her space, but my heart broke every time I saw her move away. One night, I received a text message from my father that almost made my blood freeze. "If you can't separate yourself from Elisa, you must be ready to accept the consequences." The message was like a veiled threat that loomed over me every second. The pressure from my family was getting crazier. They arranged secret meetings with people who could solve the problem. I realized that I was not only dealing with love, but also with a much greater and more dangerous power. As I pondered alone on our apartment balcony overlooking the Seine, I remembered Elisa's words, "We have to choose, fight or surrender." I realized I couldn't keep hiding behind my fear. I called Elisa and asked her to meet me at a small restaurant we used to frequent, a place full of fond memories and hope. When she arrived, her eyes were as bright as ever, but there was a weight. "To them, we can't go on like this, Lucas," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I need clarity. Are you really ready to fight for us, or should we stop now before it's too late?" I held her hand tightly, feeling the vibrations between us. "I am ready, Elisa. I will fight the world for us, but I also need time to fight the shadows of my family." Suddenly, the door to the restaurant swung open. A large man entered, his eyes fixed on us. I knew he was no ordinary guest. My heart rate jumped, fear and wariness filling my body. "Lucas Moreau," the man's deep voice was cold and sharp. "We need to talk." That night turned into a devastating turning point. Elisa and I had to face the bitter reality that our love was not only tested by feelings, but also by the forces that wanted to tear us apart by force. Behind the twinkling lights of Paris, we stood at a crossroads between hope and destruction. After the big man entered the restaurant with a cold gaze, the air around us suddenly became heavy and tense. I recognized him as one of the Moreau family's bodyguards, someone who always showed up when things started to get heated. He walked with a determined stride towards our table, causing Elisa to squeeze my hand anxiously. "Lucas Moreau." His voice was deep and authoritative. "You know why I'm here." I swallowed, trying to stay calm even as my heart raced. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. The bodyguard pulled a white envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. "This is a message from your father. He wants you to come home immediately and reconsider your choice." Elisa looked at me with worried eyes, as if our world had collapsed in an instant. I felt a wave of anger and frustration course through my veins. How the family would never accept our love as something real and valuable. After the bodyguard left, we sat in a painful silence. "Lucas," Elisa said softly. "Are you sure you can handle this? I'm afraid our love isn't strong." "Enough!" I held her hand tightly, trying to convey a reassurance that I didn't necessarily have. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I can't lose you." The days that followed felt like hell. I fought against the pressure from my family, but the threat grew more real. My phone kept ringing from numbers I didn't recognize. Anonymous messages appeared on my phone, and I began to feel the scrutiny of my every move. Meanwhile, Elisa became more withdrawn, focusing on her paintings, now filled with gray and shadow. I knew she was trying to channel her pain into her art, but I also knew how heavy the burden was on her shoulders. One night, when I came home late, I found our apartment door open. My heart pounded as I walked in and saw the mess in the room. All of Elisa's paintings were strewn across the floor, some torn and disheveled. "What happened?" I asked frantically when I found her sitting in the corner, tears streaming down her cheeks. He stared at me blankly. "They came, Lucas. They threatened me, asking me to leave you." I felt anger and fear combine in my chest. That night I promised myself to protect Elisa at all costs, but I knew the storm we were facing was not over. We were both now trapped in the vortex of my family's dark past, a battle that was not just about love, but also about life and death. The darkness of the Parisian night covered a secret that was increasingly difficult for me to keep. After the incident in the apartment, I knew that our situation had reached a critical point. Not only our love was at stake, but our lives and freedom. Elisa looked increasingly fragile, even though she tried hard to stay strong. The bright colors in her paintings had been replaced by shades of gray and black, as if depicting her feelings full of fear and anxiety. I tried to be a strong support, but I myself was starting to lose my way. That afternoon, I received a call from a man whose voice was cold and emotionless. "Lucas, your family gives you until tomorrow night to surrender. Otherwise, worse consequences will come." Fear crept into every corner of my body, but I refused to give in. I knew I had to protect Elisa and myself, even if I had to face the whole world. I asked her to meet me at a small cafe near the Pont Neuf Bridge, a place we had always considered an escape from all the chaos. When he arrived, I saw his eyes filled with the same determination and fear that I had. "We have to leave," he said quietly. "It's not safe anymore." I nodded, feeling a chill creep into my bones. "I agree. We'll find a way out of this shadow together." That night, we carefully planned our next move. I contacted an old friend with connections abroad, hoping he could help us escape and start a new life away from Moreau's shadow. But it wasn't as easy as I had imagined. A few days later, as we were leaving the apartment, we found strange signs. A door ajar, footprints in the carpet, and a security camera that hadn't been there before. Elisa cried in my arms, fear and desperation in her eyes. "They know we're leaving," she whispered. I felt anger and determination burning inside me. "I won't let them take you from me," I promised. The next day, I confronted my father in person at a secret cafe. I looked at him without fear for the first time. "That's enough, Dad. I choose Elisa and I won't back down." My father smiled coldly. "You have no idea what you're up against, Lucas. But if you stick to your decision, you'll lose everything." But I knew this was our final battle. A fight between love and power, between freedom and the shadows of the past. In the dark, Parisian night, Elisa and I stood side by side, ready to fight the world, together or not at all.